Tonight we begin our studies in Bamidbar, which is what we call the book of Numbers. Bamidbar is the Hebrew name for that book. It means in the wilderness. Tonight's Torah portion, Numbers chapter 1 to 4:20, is what we will consider. We're not going to do 3 points of interest tonight. We're actually going to do a quick preliminary preview of what we're going to be looking at over the next several weeks with the book of Bamidbar, the book of Numbers. It's a fascinating book, and there's a lot of incredibly profound teaching material in here. Low-hanging fruit, some of them difficult to reach, some of them hidden away, don't even know that they're there. And so we'll be digging into the book of Numbers again. Interesting how sometimes if you've been around fruit trees, mango trees and so on, you know well that sometimes, and I know this to be true, you can look at all the mangoes on the tree and count them all and just know what's coming, but then all of a sudden there's that one mango that's, hey, where did that come from? Didn't even know it was there. And it's revealed, and when it's ripe, when it's ready to be eaten is when it will reveal. Yesterday I was assessing that tree out there, and I found a little stash hidden in that tree, 4 mangoes in a little nice cluster in commingling with the oak, with the brush oak out there, just kind of hidden in there. So the Bible is kind of like that. There's all sorts of incredible nuggets of truth that's hidden away, and it takes a willing soul to dig in and to believe that God will reveal some of these hidden nuggets, revelation. And the book of Numbers, I just know there's some hidden mangoes in there somewhere. So we're going to do a preview tonight, sort of an upfront preview of what we're going to be looking at over the next, I don't know, 8 weeks, maybe. So I got a couple extra Hebrew words for us tonight. The first Hebrew word that I have for us is rush. And rush, we know what the word rush means, right? Head or chief. Well, that's the word that's used for censor in the book of Numbers. Isn't that strange? That the word rush, censor. And we'll try and find that mango. There's something there to be discovered. Why would the word rush be used for censor? Do a censor, to count, to number the people. So that's interesting because the book of Numbers, we know as Numbers, Bamidbar, it's called Numbers because God ordained that the children of Israel should be counted. But the word that's used is rush. Interesting, do a censor. The second Hebrew word that I have for you tonight is kofir. It's also found in tonight's Torah portion. And we'll read about those 2 Hebrew words in a few moments. So what will we cover over the next several weeks? I don't know, maybe 8, 9 weeks in studying through the book of Numbers, quite a bit. So the first thing we'll see is, what we'll talk about tonight is the censor. That word rush, that God ordained that every male over the age of 20 should be counted. Let's go in there and take a look. And the people that are counted are, the men that are counted are able-bodied men from the age of 20 and up. So no doubt there would be men 20 and up that may not be able-bodied in their 70s and 80s and so on. Although I will venture to say that in ancient Israel, men lived strong and well into their 70s and 80s and were able to go out and fight. So let's just take a look at this. In Numbers chapter 1, we're going to read 1 to 3. And this is the introduction to the book of Numbers. Then the Lord spoke to Moses in the wilderness, Bamidbar, of Sinai, in the tent of meeting, on the first of the 2nd month, in the 2nd year, after they had come out from the land of Egypt, saying, take a censer, and that's the word there, rush, head. The word rush in Hebrew is head or chief, chiefest. Take a censer of all the congregation of the sons of Israel, by their families, by their fathers' households, according to the number of the names, every male, head by head, rush by rush. That's what it says in Hebrew. from 20 years old and upwards, whoever is able to go out to war in Israel, you and Aaron shall number them by their armies. So every man, head by head, who's able to go out to fight from the age of 20 and up is to be counted. So what is that about? Anyone has any ideas about why the word rush is used for censer, taking a censer? There are 5 words actually in the Hebrew for censer. This one is unique. It's only used that way in Exodus and Numbers. There are other places in the Bible, in Chronicles and so on, later on, that will apply different Hebrew words to censer. So what is that? Any ideas? Yes?
Is it because they actually physically counted the heads with their
Yeah. That's what I'm thinking. Yes. Yes.
Well, the same thing, head count.
Head count. Right. So it's interesting that the word there is applied in that way. Take a census. Do a head count. Count the head, the chiefs of the people. Count the heads of the people. Interesting. So how many was the count? We find that in chapter 1, also 44 to 46. Let's take a look. These are the ones who were numbered, whom Moses and Aaron numbered with the leaders of Israel, 12 men, each of whom was of his father's household. So all the numbered men of the sons of Israel by their father's household, whom from 20 years old and upward, whoever was able to go out to war in Israel, even all the numbered men were 3,550 men. So the rush, the heads of households that will go out to fight, the men from 20 and up, 603,550 men. Some people deduce from that the amount of the population of Israel when they came out of Egypt was roughly 2 million. And you can understand why they would come to that conclusion, because you probably had equal women in that age category, and you had some who were above 20 that were not able to go out and fight. Then you had children. So it's conceivable that you had probably 2 million people in this Exodus story. Now, this is not the first place we find God's reference to numbering the people of Israel. The first time we see it is in Exodus. So let's get back to Exodus. Let's go to Exodus chapter 30, I think it is. Yeah, chapter 30. And we're going to read here where God initially spoke about a census. I have it marked, I think. Chapter 30, 11 to 17. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, when you take a rush, a census, of the sons of Israel to number them, then each one of them shall give a ransom. So now we're seeing that there's a ransom to be given, and that's the word kofer. The Hebrew word kofer is a ransom, and the word kofer is where we get the word a covering, hakaporet, like the covering over the Ark of the Covenant, a kippur, a cover. So the word kofer, or what's being used here, ransom, is also atonement. So take something that will atone. Take a ransom, take a covering that will atone, in other words, for Israel. For himself to the Lord, when you number them, so that there will be no plague among them when you number them. This is what everyone who is numbered shall give, half a shekel according to the shekel of the sanctuary. The shekel is 20 gerahs. Half a shekel as a contribution to the Lord. Everyone who is numbered from 20 years old and over shall give the contribution to the Lord. The rich shall not pay more than the poor, and the poor shall not pay less than half a shekel. When you give the contribution to the Lord to make atonement for yourselves. And let's read 16. 16. You shall take the atonement money, the ransom, again, that's the word there, kofar. You shall take the atonement money from the sons of Israel and shall give it to the service of the tent of meeting. It will be a memorial for the sons of Israel before the Lord to make atonement for yourselves. So this commandment was given. Now the time came at Mount Sinai where they are to actually carry out this exercise, this process of numbering the children of Israel. Half a shekel from every person who is ransomed, who is atoned for. So there's atonement given for the men of war. The men that are about to go out and lead the children of Israel in war are atoned for. You see that? And God's very particular about this because later on, David would number the men of Israel, and it's apparent that he didn't follow this procedure, and it wasn't ordained by God to begin with, and a plague came upon Israel. You see, God wants his warriors to be atoned for. You see, that's to be ransomed, not a good word there in English, but to be atoned for, to be covered. And these are the men that will go out and fight for Israel. So that's what we can take away from that. So this is the numbering of the sons of Israel, those who were able to go out and battle. Back in Numbers chapter 1, 2, in tonight's Torah portion, we see all of the listing of the sons of Israel, the different tribes, and the ones that were prepared to go out in war, go out in battle. So the next thing we will see a couple of weeks from now is we'll take a look at the Nazarite vow in chapter 6, which I believe will be next week's Torah portion. So we'll take a look at the Nazarite vow. Very fascinating vow. We know that the Nazarite vow was being practiced in the New Testament. Paul was under a Nazarite vow. So very interesting. We know that not just men took the Nazarite vow, that ladies also took the Nazarite vow. So those are some of the things we'll look at next week. In chapter 9, we'll see that the reality of Pesach is reintroduced. And it's reintroduced in chapter 9 of Numbers in terms of its relevancy, how important it is. One of the things we see in chapter 9 concerning Pesach is that it is for all. It is for all who are even the sojourners, all who are in the camp of Israel, even the sojourners that celebrate Pesach. The next thing we will see is following after the Spirit, a walk in faith. And that we'll see in chapter 9 as well. A picture of the faith walk. And Israel in the wilderness is that picture. They followed after God. God commanded them to be very deliberate in following after him. They were not to go out unless God had lifted his presence from the tent of meeting, the pillar of cloud by day, the pillar of fire by night. And so Israel was ordained by God, ordered by God, I should say, to carefully follow after him and do not make a move unless he was initiating that move. And so therein you have the picture of the faith walk. And the faith walk is the walk that we should walk. Doing everything according to God's dictate. Doing everything according to what God ordains for us to do. A careful walk with God. And we are committed to that. We should be committed to that. So we have that incredible picture that we see there in chapter 9. Now in chapter 10, we'll see, we've got a picture of Hobab. Who is Hobab? Anyone knows? Hobab? The son of Reuel, the Midianite. His name was Hobab. Beloved, actually. Absolutely. He became known as Yethro because he went back, and that's what the word Yethro means. Israel, he returned back. But his name was Hobab, the son of Reuel, the high priest of the Midianites. So he became known as Yethro. So Hobab, we'll see this next week, not next week, we'll see this in chapter 10. And we'll take a good long look at this. This is a fascinating story with Yethro, how he came to Moses and he gave godly instruction to Moses, a Midianite. The Bible tells us that he was a high priest of God among the Midianites. Who are the Midianites? Who are the Midianites? They're sons of Abraham, right? Right. Ishmael, they're sons of Ishmael. So we'll see that very clearly as we go along. So also we see here that they are in chapter 10 that the people of Israel will set out from Mount Sinai. We'll see this. This is when God ordained that the people should set out from Mount Sinai. And where were they going? To Kadesh Barnea. A huge, huge allegorical picture we're going to take from that. And so God ordained Israel to set out from Mount Sinai in chapter 10 of Numbers, and that they would go out as an army arrayed in an array for battle. They're basically an army, where the tribes, the 12 tribes will go out. The men who are equipped for battle will go out before Israel. And now this is where Moses prayed to God, and he said, God, let God arise, let his enemies be scattered, let those who hate him flee before him. And we'll see that when we read in chapter 10. Also, we'll begin to see a tragic reality, and that is that the people of Israel will begin to grumble quite frequently. We'll see that the first time we see that in the book of Numbers. It happened before in the book of Exodus a few times. Book of Numbers chapter 11 is when we'll see it for the first time in the book of Numbers. And it's hideous. This is when Israel grumbled and complained about the manna. What's the manna? The food from heaven. Right? We'll discuss that. That manna was a picture of Yeshua. Jesus said that I am that bread that came down from heaven. Jesus is the manna. What God supplies for us in this wilderness of our lives that are here that he gives us to sustain us. That's the story of Israel and the manna in the wilderness. It was a food from heaven that had all of the necessary elements to sustain an entire people of 2 million people. An exodus of 2 million people to be sustained from heaven with manna. And so we have pictures in our minds of what manna is, but what we're going to see here when we read in chapter 11, we'll get a better, broader picture of what manna is. Manna was effectively a seed. Seeds that came down. It would accumulate on the ground overnight like dew. You would collect the seeds. You will crush the seeds in a pestle, and you'll make a dough with it. You'll bake it and eat it. That's manna. Manna wasn't this fluffy thing that looked like cotton candy that came down from the sky. It was seeds that required what? A work, process, a daily process, day in, day out, 40 years of preparation, every day. You collect your seeds. You couldn't bake it for the following day. You had to prepare for yourself what you needed on that day. It had to be fresh on the spot. You collect your seeds, you grind it into a paste, you make a dough, you bake it, and you eat it every day, day in, day out. So the people began to complain very early about that, right? We see this in chapter 11. What did they say to Moses? You brought us out here to kill us. All we have is this disgusting manna. You're telling me that we're going to eat this manna? This is all we have? What about the fish? What about the leeks? What about the onions, the melons? You're telling us that we're going to miss all of that? And this was a complaint against God, against God's providence, what God had provided for the people of Israel. And God took issue with this, of course. Moses became irate about this, but then Israel paid a high price for this. So how does this relate to Yeshua, the manna? He is that bread that came down from heaven. He is that manna. Well, the truth is, Israel had to process this manna, this food from heaven. As that relates to Yeshua, there's a process involved with Yeshua as well. He's not that fluffy stuff that comes from the sky and you just, with your basket, you collect it and eat it, hand to mouth type food. You have to work on your relationship with Jesus. Isn't that true? You've got to devote yourself. You have to commit yourself to Yeshua. And it's a daily thing. It's not something you do once in your life. He is that bread that came from heaven. He is that manna. And daily we have to partake of him. He said, unless you eat my flesh and drink my blood, you have no part in him. Well, we are to eat that flesh, eat that manna from heaven daily. Daily. He sustains us daily. When we turn to him, what does that look like? Well, you live in his word. You abide in his word. Abide in him. Daily, you fully expect that God's going to give you something from his word. And you build that routine. You develop that process in your life. It's the manner. You develop that process in your life where daily you're expecting God to give you food from heaven. This is what God expects from us. This sustains us. That manna in the wilderness was incredible. Whatever it was comprised of, whatever its elements were, it was incredible because it was there to sustain the people of Israel for 40 years, and this is all they had. It supplied them with all their minerals. It supplied them with all their protein, their carbohydrates. It gave them all the vitamins, the antioxidants that they needed. How many antioxidants are there? 150 or something. It gave them everything they needed to sustain them for life in the wilderness. Life in the wilderness is difficult. Yes, and this manna that God had supplied provided them with everything they needed. Can't you see that wonderful picture of Yeshua? Being everything we need in this wilderness. We don't have to go for the melons, for the leeks. We don't have to run after other food, which is our tendency. Yeshua is seldom enough for us. We need more. We want more. He's all we need. He's all we have. And you can go after the leeks and the melons and the whatever else, the quail. God will give you quail. He'll give you quail till it comes through your nose, like the children of Israel. Be satisfied with Yeshua. Be satisfied with that bread that came down from heaven. Use it. Eat it. Nourish yourself with it daily, and you will be sustained. It has everything in it to keep you throughout this wilderness. And it's easy for us to forget that. It's easy for us to forget that. I was thinking about this. It came across my mind earlier tonight as we began to worship. Several months ago, maybe even a year or so ago, Lisa took a pretty severe fall at the house. It was a Sunday afternoon after church, and she was walking across the living room area there, and she slipped on a doggy mattress, and she went headfirst into a very, very heavy solid wood table. And I witnessed it. I wasn't close enough to stop it. I saw it in slow motion. And she went headfirst into the leg of this table and moved the table. And there was a loud crack, and she went down really hard. Again, it was all in slow motion in my perspective, from my perspective. And I saw her blank out. She went out for a moment. And I bent over, panicked. I bent over, and I was, I'm trained to intervene in emergencies like that. So I went into function mode. I went into that mode of beginning to provide aid for someone who was severely injured. But she was in and out, and she began to pray. I heard her praying. And I said to myself, you dummy, why aren't you turning to Jesus at this time? She's there on the ground, going in and out, and she's praying as she's on the ground. She had the presence of mind to pray, and I didn't. I went into action mode, reaction mode, but she was praying, and that's when I said, duh. And so we began to pray, and we went to the emergency room, and there was absolutely no damage at all. She had an abrasion, and that was it. It wasn't even swollen. But she moved that table. It was a mighty crash. She went headlong, stumbled about 2 or 3 feet, and crashed into that table. It was amazing. So I take away from that at times we don't turn to that manner. In times of emergency, in times of want and need. It's sort of our propensity to not turn directly to him. But Lisa did. And so he is our sustenance. He is our life. When we're in a place of peril and difficulty, we must learn to turn to him, because he is what God has provided for us. He's our nourishment. He's our life. Literally. He said it. Jesus said it. There's life in the Father. There's life in me. And that's the factor of him being manna. That's manna. So we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go along. The next thing we will see in the book of Numbers, after the people complain about the manna, there's another rebellion with Miriam. Miriam didn't quite like the fact that Moses took an African wife, a Cushite. Pretty standard. The Cushites were Africans. The Cushites were not Midianites. Moses' first wife, Zephorah, was a Midianite, right? The people of Midia are not Cushites. So what we see now, the following rebellion we see, which is in chapter 12, is where Miriam complains that she rebels against Moses because Moses had married a Cushite woman. Now the story of Zephorah is that she turned back. When God confronted Moses about the fact that his sons were not circumcised, you know the story in Exodus. His sons were not circumcised, and God confronted him. What did God say to Moses? You're not going forward. There's no way you're going to enter into Egypt, the Redeemer of Israel, with two sons that are not circumcised. That's basically the summarization of what happened. And then there was pressure between him and Zephorah. Zephorah conducted the procedure, and she threw the foreskins at Moses with the flint stone that she used, a flint stone, and we don't see her again. She went back to Reuel, Yethro. And she's there throughout the entire process of the confrontation when God confronted Egypt. The next time we see Zephorah is when Reuel brings her out with her two sons to meet Moses again. But Moses was married to a Cushite woman. Still controversial. The truth is Moses took a second wife, a Cushite wife, probably Ethiopian. This created a great stir with Miriam, and Miriam rebelled against him. You know the story, and of course Aaron was pulled into it. Aaron has a tendency to get pulled into rebellion, doesn't he? And that's the story of Aaron's life. When Moses rebelled, and we'll see this later on, he got pulled into that as well. In fact, God commanded Aaron to die, and he died because he had been pulled into rebellion at least 3 times. At Mount Sinai with the golden calf, he got pulled into that one. In fact, he was actually kind of a ringleader in that whole thing, wasn't he? What did he say? We threw the gold into the fire, and pop, comes out a golden calf. So what's left to do here, Moses, but to worship it? The second rebellion he finds himself in is with Miriam. And he's standing with Miriam against Moses, because Moses had married an African woman. The story is incredible. God struck Miriam, and Moses interceded on behalf of Miriam, and she was healed. In the book of Numbers is where we begin to see the true character of Messiah in Moses. You'll see this really blossom in Moses. We've seen it before in Exodus, but we'll see it really clearly in the book of Numbers again. So a second rebellion occurs, and that's with Miriam. And then the next thing we will see is the 10 spies. And of course, there's rebellion associated with that as well. God never ordained that there should be a campaign, there should be some reconnaissance of spies going in to spy out the land. He never did. It was something that Israel suggested. Probably the leaders of the 12 tribes. How do we know this? Because in Deuteronomy, it says it there quite clearly. God didn't ordain that they should do this. Now, from God's point of view, what did he want Israel to do? Send reconnaissance in? Or to simply trust him? Go forward. Why do you need to spy out the land? It's as if Israel said, we need to do this. And God said, oh, here we go. Go ahead. This is not going to end well. And they came back with an evil report. 10 of them did, the 10 spies, right? Joshua and Caleb, they stood their ground. They said, no, 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 no. God parted the sea. He destroyed the world's strongest empire. The Egyptian empire was humbled, destroyed, 10 plagues. He can more than keep us. The giants are like grasshoppers. Anyway, the 10 spies prevailed and ended up in hot water, in great trouble, and this created another opportunity for rebellion. We see following that in chapter 16, another rebellion. And what is this rebellion? The leaders of Israel joined together with 250 other leaders and stood against Moses and Aaron, challenged Moses and Aaron. And they basically said, hey, who are you? We're all anointed. We're all anointed here. Who are you? And that was an unfortunate challenge because they learned a very difficult lesson. What was the outcome of that? Very unfortunate. A couple of years ago, we had an unfortunate situation here when there was I'm not going to get into much detail, but I got accused of stuff, and the person that did that really attacked me and said, "You're no Moses. Who do you think you are?" I'm like, wait a minute, I'm no Moses. I'm disappointed with that. I didn't know I was being compared to Moses. So she attacked me pretty strongly. She wanted to have a business meeting where she would attack me with that stuff. That was the last time she ever appeared here. She never returned and will never return. And she was a part of this congregation for many years, a couple of decades. What happened? Did I oust her? Did I demand that she would not be here? I didn't lift a finger. I didn't say a word. I was more than willing to re-embrace her here because she was clearly out of her mind. And yes, she was. So redemption is always my attitude when dealing with these types of situations. It always is. I want redemption. God didn't see fit that she would be redeemed. And she never set foot in this congregation again. God worked it out. Rebellion is always met by God's response, by his wrath. He knew my heart. He knew that my heart was redemption. If I had sought revenge for myself, it would have gone completely wrong. So I prayed for this person. I continued to interact with them, to help them even. But they never returned. See, rebellion always has that effect in the life of people. I'm no Moses, far from it. But God has appointed me to be his leader in this congregation, and I had to take hard action. I had to take strong action. And this person compared me to Moses. You're no Moses. My heart's broken that I'm no Moses. I'm no Moses. So here you have this incredible situation where 250 men, together with other leaders, stood up and accused Moses and said, we're all anointed. Who do you think you are? They ended up in a fiery pit. Terrible, terrible rebellion. Much for us to learn here, much for us to consider. Rebellion never ends well with God, never. Not even for Moses, which is what we'll talk about here in a couple of minutes. So you had this incredible rebellion that we see. Now, chapter 19, we'll see the red heifer. Very important. We'll take a long, hard look at this red heifer. There are people all around the world that are trying to breed red heifers, right? In Israel, in the Galilee area, in Texas, in other parts of the world. I think even in the Orient, people are trying to breed red heifers. And what's the issue with the red heifer? It provides a purification for the Kohanim to function in the temple. And it is believed that the red heifer is needed in order for the temple to be consecrated whenever that happens. So there's a lot of eschatological fervence about the red heifer. And yeah, I can see that. But I'll tell you something that I know. a lot of the folks that are busy trying to procure a red heifer are pre-tribulationists. They're pre-tribulationists. And part of their motivation is to come up with a red heifer, and that's going to somehow hasten their rapturing out of here. I know that for a fact. I've read some of their information. And these people are hardcore pre-tribulationists that are waiting for the coming of the Messiah. The red heifer is going to hasten. They're just waiting for Israel to build the Antichrist temple. Let me be frank with you. That's their point of view. Israel is going to build the Antichrist temple. There's going to be 3.5 years of tribulation and 3.5 more years of tribulation. The Antichrist will take his seat in the temple. The red heifer is pivotal to all of this. What's wrong with that whole picture? Is there anything wrong with that picture? The pre-tribulationists are completely off base. Completely off base. They're just looking for a ticket out of here, so let's procure a red heifer so that the Antichrist temple can be built. The Antichrist will show up and we'll be zooped out of here. We can do it. It's a terrible thing. So I'm all about a red heifer. It has to happen in order for the third temple to be fully consecrated. But hold on. The third temple is referred to as the temple of God. How many places? In 2 places. In 2 places, the third temple is referred to as the temple of God. It's not the temple of the Antichrist. That's ridiculous. The Antichrist is already in the temple. Because when Paul made that statement in 1 Thessalonians, the word that he used was nehos, not heron, physical temple, natural temple. Nehos, which is the living temple, the church. The Antichrist is in the church, friends. He's been there for 1,600 years at least. So, anyway, so the red heifer, it's interesting. There's something there for us, an allegorical picture. One was that we'll talk about when we get to the red heifer. So, now in chapter 20, we're going to see rebellion, a different type of rebellion. Rebellion from the standpoint of leadership, that leadership, Moses and Aaron would rebel. So horribly would their rebellion be that God will not allow Moses to see the land of Israel, to enter into the land of Israel. And Aaron would die. In fact, Aaron died shortly after this at Mount. Moses died and was buried at Mount Nebo. Aaron died at Mount. Can't remember. Anyway, so Aaron was commanded to die shortly after this rebellion. So because of this rebellion, and what was the rebellion? Moses struck the rock twice rather than spoke to the rock. God wanted him to speak to the rock. He didn't. He struck the rock when he should have spoken to the rock, and he rebelled against God. In chapter 20, we'll also see, 21, where Israel begins to conquer. They enter into the land of the Canaanites. From Moses' rebellion in chapter 20 to 21 is a leap of about 35 years. So now they're at the end of this process, and they're conquering the Canaanites. The king of Arad comes out to meet them, and there's a battle over Arad. How many of us went to Tel Arad? Went to Tel Arad, right? Right. So Tel Arad is the region of Arad. So the king of Arad, no doubt, he was in that same region that we went to, came out to meet Israel, and other kings came out to fight with Israel. And so chapter 21, it just portrays a tremendous victory, a series of victories on behalf of Israel. And then we'll see Balaam. Balaam, of course, in chapter 20, actually 22 to 25. Throughout the rest of the book of Numbers, we'll see Balaam. Story of Balaam, prophet of God, prophet for hire, anointed by God, but he was a prophet for hire. We'll look at all of the aspects of Balaam. Very interesting. And then the unfortunate reality, rebellion again at Baal Peor. This is a very interesting rebellion. Moses and Eleazar, the son of Aaron, stood there and wept, while the children of Israel, the sons of Israel, were conducting themselves horribly before God with the Midianite ladies, and they were weeping before the tent of meeting. And what happened? Phinehas said, why are you standing there? He took a spear and he took action. You know the story of Phinehas. God said, I like that. God said to Phinehas, I'm going to make a covenant with you. Your sons will be priests. So who was Phinehas? He was a son of Eleazar, who was a son of Aaron. Effectively, all of the Kohanim that followed after Phinehas, after this event, when Phinehas took action, were sons of Phinehas. None of the other sons of Aaron were included because God made that covenant. So the priest that will follow after Eleazar, Phinehas, becomes the progenitor of the entire Kohanim, the priests. Very interesting. And then finally we'll see Israel's destruction of the Midianites. God will instruct Israel, will direct Israel to defeat the Midianites. Why? Because of Baal Peor and because of Balaam. Balaam succeeded to bring a curse upon Israel, and the Midianite women were a part of that. And so the Midianites, a mere 30 years after Hobab, the Jethro, was amiable with Israel, a mere 30 years later, they're coming against Israel to bring destruction against Israel. And God destroys the Midianites. So that brings us to the end of the book of Numbers. And so these are the things we're going to be looking at over the next several weeks. Lots of pictures in there of rebellion and the attitude of the one who rebels against God. Even Moses would rebel against God. But there are wonderful pictures that we'll see throughout the book of Numbers that points to the reality of God's incredible love for Israel. That even though they rebelled against him a dozen times, I think altogether about 14 times, he continues to uphold them and keep them in his purposes. Finally, at the end of the book of Numbers, of course, the children of Israel are ready to receive their final message from Moses, which is the book of Deuteronomy, after which they will cross into the land of Israel. So the book of Numbers is an incredible study. It's not by any means at all a boring book, the book of Numbers. It's not by any means at all. It's a very power-packed book, and lots to look at, lots of allegorical pictures in there that we will consider. So with that, I will say Shabbat Shalom, and have a wonderful Shabbat.